or people just don't know it exists. And so we focus on building enough people power to make sure those solutions get pushed forward. We learn in our work that there are two main types of power in our society, a lot of organized money and a lot of organized people. We as a nonprofit clearly do not have the money part of that, but what we do have is the people. And so we use that. And the key word here is that they are organized people. So this isn't just, a rallying effort. We get a bunch of people in a room. These are people who are in the process, invested in the process, know what's going on, affected by an issue, or at least angry about it, and are coming together to press for justice. And so we really focus on making sure we have a large amount of organized people that come together in this room at our Nehemiah Action, which is our event that we just had, to press for solutions that we find. So our process kind of starts every year in the fall. We start by getting people together, usually in houses. Obviously, that couldn't happen this year because of the pandemic, but we get together in small groups in houses and just let people talk. Let people figure out what the problem is by listening to their stories. And so that's how we determine what we work on. We decided to work on mental health, education, gun violence, and housing, all because in those meetings in people's houses, that's what we just kept hearing over and over again as being the problems in Columbia, Richland County area. And so I understand that as community health workers, you all are pretty much on the front lines in the community, and you know pretty well what the needs of the community are. And so in just a second, I want to just call on a few of y'all just to see what those problems are that you would like to see advocacy behind, and how you know that to be a problem. And by that, I mean, do you have a story about why this is a problem? So for example, this past year in the House meeting, I shared a story about affordable housing because that affects me directly. It affected me growing up. I grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, in Section 8 public housing. We had to move like 8 times my childhood because the houses we were in were either falling apart, we just couldn't afford them, whatever. And so I struggled with, my family struggled with secure housing as I was growing up. And then I moved to Columbia. After I graduated from college, I got a 1-bedroom apartment out in Elgin because that was the cheapest that I could find. And even then, I struggled to pay rent each month. And after a year, it came time to renew my lease. And the apartment complex said that if I chose to stay, my rent would increase by $200 a month. And I absolutely could not afford that. And so fortunately, or I guess unfortunately, 2 other women in my church were also in a similar position. They were about to renew their leases. They were met with increases that they couldn't afford either. So we just decided to move in together. And so now we live in a 3-bedroom apartment in Blythewood, because splitting the rent and living together made it a lot more manageable for us. But as much as we love each other and we love living together, we would prefer not to. If we had the choice, we would like to be able to live on our own, afford our own place. That's just not possible for us, even though we're all full-time workers, making pretty good salaries. I would say there's just not enough affordable housing in the area for that to be a possibility. And I know how that affects people growing up because I lived in that, but also it was a big concern for me this year specifically because we were told, all 2020 to stay safe and stay home, knowing that people don't have homes to go to, or they're at risk of getting kicked out of their homes. And the eviction moratorium was put in place, but that ends at some point. And when that ends, there's a long line of people that face being put out in the middle of a pandemic, which is, for lack of better words, disgusting to me. And so that was a big problem that I wanted to see fixed this year with our affordable housing campaign, is just to make sure that's a priority for our government, to make sure that they put forward a solution that would make it so that affordable housing is not few and far between. People who need homes can find one, and people who have homes can stay in them. So does anyone have any stories about needs in their community that they work with that they would like to share, or something that they would want to see advocacy behind?
I'm sure there's several people who have those stories that they have needs. One that comes to my heart most recently is I have an uncle who is dealing with alcohol addiction. And he's in a community that has suffered greatly from addictions. And they have been basically criminalized and victimized by the addictions versus provided any support. So one of those things that I wish to see and I hope to advocate for is to make sure that all communities are supported, all communities where there's a huge problem with addictions are supported, and finding out the root causes of what's going on in those communities to help the people in those communities get the support they need so that they can be productive and get beyond their addictions.
I'll go next. I'm Summer, and I would like to advocate for Medicaid expansion in South Carolina. I'm a nurse by trade, and I've seen the barriers that people face when they don't have health insurance and can't afford to pay. And when I was doing case management work, I actually went to a neurology appointment with a patient who was in a wheelchair. She had just been discharged from the hospital. She had MS, but had not been deemed disabled by the state. You know, that can take years. And she needed to follow up with neurology to get her medications. And we were turned away at the front desk because she didn't have $250 to pay up front. And I was furious. So anyway, pitched a little fit, had a little mini meltdown, and ended up getting her in to see the doctor. But imagine how many people are out there that are trying to get back to see a doctor, and they don't have insurance and they can't afford to pay, and they don't have, you know, an advocate there with them to be able to stand up and say, you know, this is this person's situation. Can you help us, please? So we need to expand Medicaid in this state. So, you know, that won't insure everybody, but it will cover a good many more people. And so that's something that I'd like to advocate more for.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I want to second the Medicaid one. I work with women who are pregnant, and then I follow them until baby's 18 months old. A lot of these women, you know, their Medicaid covers until 6 weeks after they have the baby, and they can go to that postpartum appointment. Sometimes due to lack of childcare, they can't make it at 6 weeks. Maybe they can make it at, you know, the next week, but by then their Medicaid's cut off, so they don't get that postpartum appointment. And they also can't go to the doctor later on because, like, if they're found an underlying disease, like if they have gestational diabetes, hypertension, they're not going to be able to get treatment for it afterwards because they don't have Medicaid to cover it.
And I'll just add, I'm going to put on my Pasos hat. I'm Mike Young from Pasos and SCCHWA. And so Pasos is a statewide nonprofit that supports the Latino population specifically. And through that work, you know, I've gotten to know where all the gaps and barriers are for the community here in South Carolina. I'm from California, and it's not the same over there. You know, over there, you got bilingual signs, got entire areas, even predominantly in Spanish. But yeah, I know the history is different and everything, but the resources are there, and the mentality is there to see the value and to lift up and know that that community has strengths that will contribute to the betterment of everyone. And being here, that's not the common mindset. And that turns into hostility and discrimination and prejudice and being overlooked and being an afterthought in general. And, you know, it's like we're missing out on something, you know, and because of all of that, individuals feel frightened and scared, terrified of so many things. And because of that, health, you know, is impacted, and generations and children and education and everything. So just changing that mindset, I think is huge in the advocacy in bringing forth the value of diversity.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone else that wanted to share? Excuse me, wanted to share anything? Right, well, I appreciate the stories that you all shared. One thing that Summer said that I wanted to really focus on was that frustrated part. I feel like a lot of us have that similar feeling that you see a problem that you're faced with on the daily, and there's nothing being changed about it. I think, Mike, you said it best. We're not valuing people in the community because we aren't talking about this kind of stuff. And that can make you frustrated and angry. And we at More Justice, we know a lot of people, especially in the South, they don't want to say that they're angry about things. We're supposed, it's student hospitality. We're supposed to be really nice to everyone and always just, be happy and cheerful. But these things are frustrating. They make us angry. And that's one of the things that brings us all together at More Justice, as we have a similar anger over this problem that we want to see fixed. And we're going to let that be not, hot anger, we're just blowing off at the gasket, but use that anger to fuel our passion for what we do. And so I'm really glad that you said that word specifically, because that we really, really want people to understand that it's okay to be angry about this. You should be angry about it because it's not okay. But to let that anger fuel into something that produces work and produces advocacy. And so I saw that Chantel just joined in. This is our lead organizer at More Justice. She's actually new. She's been here since September, October, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Chantel, we were just talking about, I was telling them about the listening process and how we share stories of what's affecting us to figure out what the problem is. And people just were sharing some things that were important to them, like Medicaid expansion, resources for the immigrant Latino community as well. And so that's always our first step. Listening, it has to be the first step, because you can't work on a problem unless you know what the problem is. And that's how we figure out what the problem is people talking about it. And we have anywhere between 75 to 100 of these small meetings every year. And then we take what those big issues are to our larger population. So More Justice has about 500 to 600 members. And then they vote on what we're going to address that year, which is how we got to our issues of education, mental health, affordable housing, gun violence that we're working on right now. But once we figure out a solution, we can't just say, okay, cool, affordable housing is sorry, not a solution, a problem. Affordable housing is a problem. We're going to go up to the State House, go up to Richland County Council and say, fix affordable housing. It's not going to get us anywhere because that's not specific. There's no solution behind that. That's just us saying there is a problem. So what we have to do afterwards is research what that is, figure out what exactly the problem is, and a solution that could alleviate that problem. And how we do that is we have committees. We have our research committees who kind of guide that research process. They talk to people who are affected, who we refer to as the experts in a problem. They talk to people who are living in that issue, talk to people who study that problem, and talk to people who work on solutions for that, just to kind of get an idea of what the issue is, what can be done about it. And like I said earlier, a lot of the times there's always a solution. It's just sitting on a shelf gathering dust somewhere because there's no advocacy behind it. There's no power behind it to get it pushed through. So once they find that solution, that's when we start to organize our people to advocate for that and to build power behind getting that pushed through. And we do that in a bunch of different ways at More Justice. Specifically, we have like research visits people can attend, committee meetings they can attend, where they can hear about the issue. Because one thing that's really important is public education. As many people that know about the problem, the better, because then it's harder to hide or push under the rug and it's being talked about. So one of the best strategies I can think of is just to be vocal about it, talk about it in your conversations with your friends, your family, talk about it in meetings. It might be uncomfortable at some point because you might be seen as the Debbie Downer. I was told that I was that one time with my family because I was just like, everything is horrible. But the more that you talk about it, the more people are aware of it and know that, okay, this is a problem that needs to be fixed. And that helps get people organized, that keyword that I mentioned earlier, around what the solution is, because the more people that are upset about something or aware about something, the more likely they are to want to fight for it and fight for a solution to fix it. And so we get people at all of our meetings, we're telling stories, all our meetings where we're talking about facts that we learned, all our meetings we're talking about how the problem is changing, so people are always aware about that. So we keep that very much so in the forefront. People are always aware and people are always in tune with what's going on around them, whether they face it or not. And so as our research committees are kind of figuring out the problem itself and the solution, What they also have to do is to make a plan. So figure out who you need to talk to about the solution. So for example, for our affordable housing campaign, we're asking the county to implement what's called an affordable housing trust fund. So we're working really closely with getting the Richland County Council on board with this idea so they can implement it. For our education campaign, it's the school board. They're the ones with the power to implement that. For gun violence, it's city law enforcement. So you have to know who your audience is and who you need to be talking to. Like I said, the more people who know, the better. We talk to other officials as well about the issue, but we really focus on those who are in the position to do something about it. So figure out who that is for whatever solution that you're advocating for, and meet with them, have people share stories. Especially if they are an elected official, you are their voters, you put them in office, they work for you. So if you tell them this is a problem, it is then their job to do something about it. And it's even better if you already have a solution prepared for them. So they don't even have to give you the runaround of, oh yeah, we'll look into it, we'll study it. You're like, no, you already did it. Here's a solution that we found that would work. Will you take steps towards that? So that helps out as well. And make a plan for how to use your power base. So bring the solution publicly to this person or group or official or whoever has the power to implement it. We often learn that a lot of decisions are made behind closed doors, and those closed door conversations often leave out the most people who are impacted by the problem, which is, we don't think is the way that should be done. We advocate for everyone to be at the table, especially those who are affected. So I would recommend bringing that solution publicly to the person or to the group or whoever. Make sure your power base is there. Make sure they know that there is widespread community support from voters specifically who want this implemented. Do it often as well. It makes it, like I said, hard to ignore if they're constantly told this is a problem. And then have a lot of accountability and follow-up. If you talk to them about this problem and a solution and they say yes, that's great. That's not the last step. It's actually the first step in getting your solution implemented. You need to make sure that after they actually say yes, that you are following up, making sure that they are doing what they need to do to get that push forward. You're holding them accountable publicly as well. You're reporting back to your people, your power base, saying, hey, we talked to so-and-so. They said they would do this. They did it last month, or they haven't done it yet. Just make sure everyone's aware of what's going on in case you need to do some more intense follow-up later on. Just keep it in the forefront, because it's really, really easy. Obviously, as we talked about earlier, there's so many different problems right now that need advocacy, that need work done. So it's really easy for everything to just get kind of overwhelming or lost in a pile of other things. So a really key point in advocacy is just to make sure it's always in the forefront, always talk about it, always ask about it, always follow up on it, never just, assume that they're going to do that themselves. And keep people focused and committed to the goal through your storytelling. So I know that you all work pretty hands-on with the community. You hear stories every single day about what people are facing. If they're comfortable with you sharing it, then let them know. People have hearts, and if they hear about something that's happening to someone else, that changes how they think about a problem. So for example, I think someone mentioned earlier, addiction. That's something that I personally have a lot of experience with. Both my parents were addicts and my best friend is as well. And I grew up around that, and I never talked about it because it was a taboo thing no one ever talked about. But because I didn't talk about it, because I didn't think that I was able to, nothing around me was happening. There was no awareness about it. But as I grew up and learned just how bad, I guess is the best word, that this disease is, I'm like, me being quiet isn't going to change that. And so getting together with people who are also either affected by that problem, or who are living with that disease, or who just want something change about it, getting those people together, talking about it, making it not as taboo, and then keeping that momentum up and fighting for it has also led to some changes happening back at home in Winston-Salem, where there are more resources for people who are living with addiction. So just, keep telling stories about your own personal experiences with people that you work with, to anyone that you talk to, kind of build that momentum and keep it focused throughout your campaigns. And I don't know exactly, I would like to ask exactly what kind of solutions that you all have heard of or would like to see implemented. I don't know if it's necessarily like a law that needs to be implemented, or a bill, or just more resources, or you need more funding, like whatever your solution is. Obviously that tailors how your plan's gonna go. but I would identify that first, make sure people know about that, figure out exactly what you need to do that, and then keep at it. Like, you just, no one's perfect at this. This isn't necessarily an area where there's a quick, streamlined way to get things done. Unfortunately, everything requires some adaptability and a lot of focus and work. But I do truly believe, I'm sorry, they're cutting grass outside my window right now, but I do truly believe that everyone can be an advocate in their own way. You don't have to be super popular. You don't have to be super outgoing. You don't have to have any certain special set of skills. All you have to do is be willing to talk about something, to fight for something, and to join with other people who are willing to do the same thing. And so that's kind of how our process is based off of. We have just regular community members in the Columbia-Richland County area. They come together every single year. We talk about these issues. We find a solution. We do really intense research. We figure out a solution, and we just get people together at our big Nehemiah action every year. This year we had about 1,100 people show up. We invite our local officials to attend as well. Usually when we're in person, they're on stage, but this year it was on Zoom. We bring them on stage. We say, hey, this is your community right here in front of you. This is what they're struggling with. This is what's hurting them. This is how. We tell those stories. We tell them we looked into it. We found that this is a solution that could really help these people. With you having the power to implement it, will you do that? Yes or no? And, hopefully they say yes. Sometimes they say no. We negotiate, try to get to a yes. But it's that public accountability of them having to face the problem kind of face on and saying, yes, I will do this. Yes, I will implement this. That really gets solutions pushed forward. So that's kind of how we do things at More Justice. Chantel, if you want to add anything, I know it kind of just breezed over all that information, but that's our process really. We do that every single year. We've gotten some pretty big wins so far. We're still working on some other things that aren't going as quickly, but we're dedicated. People are committed because they have that shared anger and frustration. And I think, this kind of continued effort towards advocacy will bring a lot of good change to Columbia and Richland County. And so, Chantel, I don't know if you're trying to talk or not, but your boss.
Yeah, I think that was really good overview. I would add, Kalli mentioned it, but our testimonies are a powerful tool that we use throughout the entire process. Because, what's a great thing about More Justice is that a lot of people are on board for issues that don't even affect them directly per se, right? So you might look at an affordable housing. We have members who are able to live well, but they still stand up for that. And I think a huge part of that is our testimonies. So it's number one, used to engage our members, and then it's used to tell the story before our public officials, and then used to build our people power. So everybody is being moved by these powerful testimonies of stories that affect people right around you, everyday people. So I will want to add that piece.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd also like to just ask, I know we talked a little bit about the problems that y'all are dealing with, but are there any solutions that you want to see pushed through? I know one was, Medicaid expansion was mentioned more recently, but are there any other things that y'all are working on or would like to see implemented?
This is Julie. I just wanted to add to what Chantel just said, and something that we did a lot of, especially when I was at Pasos with Mike, and where I think community health workers, in addition to the stuff that you're talking about, that the very active advocacy, which is fantastic. I mean, because it's like true, like authentic engagement of folks that want to change a problem and have the solutions. But another thing that we did a lot of was kind of what Chantel was referring to, and what we called voice bringing. So like, I don't think as community health workers, we should ever claim to be giving a voice to anyone, because everybody has a voice. But as people who are bridges between folks who have resources and folks who have solutions, like you said, we can help bring those voices together, and help bring those community voices and community testimonies of people with lived experience to the table. And it's really powerful. I mean, when you're sitting at tables of folks who have resources and who are, wanting to invest those resources in a way that makes a difference. I mean, they really do, but they don't really have the tools or the stories or the lived experience of people who have been affected by the issues and know the solutions inherently. or could be part of the solution, when they hear the like testimonies and stories, either directly or from community health workers, like Rebecca just shared, right? That she works with moms every day, and this is what these moms are dealing with. Light bulbs go off, and a lot of times the people with the resources are like, oh wow, so actual people are being affected by this. It's not just something I read about or the latest data report I saw, but it's actual people, and you're telling me how this is affecting their lives and their ability to be healthy, right? And that ability, for example, with PASOS, working with so many individuals who are undocumented, a lot of times those individuals don't feel safe yet coming forward and telling their story. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. But PASOS, as community health workers that are part of that community, can bring those stories forward and say, hey, I'm working with this mom who's undocumented, and here is her story, and you need to hear it. And people will sit back and listen. So I just think it's such a powerful piece of advocacy that us as community health workers really need to make sure that we're doing.
Yeah, stories are always going to be your best strategy to get anything implemented, because we have all the statistics in the world about issues, right? I can tell you a bunch of different statistics about affordable housing right now, but listening to the story of how Miss Gloria can't afford her housing right now for her or her son, who is legally blind, that's going to last more in someone's heart and someone's mind than any number that I can ever give anybody. So I would definitely underline, bold, whatever, all that Julie just said, because your stories are always, always, always going to be your best tool.
And what Kalli just said, we don't know this for sure, but Ms. Gloria grew up with a public official who is the chair for the county council, who were asking for an affordable housing trust fund. And so we don't know if her direct story like triggered a special string in his heart because he grew up with her. And so even though we were expecting pushback a little bit at our event, he went into an immediate yes. And I think it took our negotiators aback because we had done hours of preparation for pushbacks. And when we found out, like, she grew up with him, and Kalli remembered, we're like, we wonder if that did the change, because that is possible, like, as likely as we take it. So that's another layer of stories. Like, you don't know, like, what that can trigger in a certain person that you're asking based off of relationships, even if not with that person, but a family relationship, a friend relationship. And so, yeah, just adding on to that.
Yeah, we had practiced every no in the book. And it's not an immediate yes.
He's like, yes.
Of course. Like, oh, okay. So yeah, those are always going to help too.
That's awesome, because it reminds you that it's such a small world. You never know who knows who.
Right.
And network is always going to be so key.
Right. And I guess one other thing I want to make sure we talk about too is how to deal with and invite tension into these conversations too. I know, speaking for myself personally, I am not a very confrontational person. I don't enjoy tension at all. However, that is a really helpful tool that we use to bring urgency to these issues. I think people have a bad connotation of what the word tension is. They think of it immediately as negative, as this thing that we want to avoid at all times. But there is tension between someone having to decide, am I going to pay for my rent this month, or am I going to buy groceries for my family? Am I going to pay rent this month or buy medicine that I need? You know, am I going to tell my story to someone or keep it quiet because I don't feel comfortable or safe? Like, there's tension right there in them having to make those decisions. And so we invite tension into these conversations to make people realize that these issues people are facing aren't easy ones. They're ones that bring a lot of emotion, ones that bring a lot of personal confrontation and confrontation with different issues as well. And so when we talk about these, when we have our big meetings, people are always nervous because they're like, oh no, you're gonna, bring this public official on stage, you're gonna make them say yes or no. Isn't that so rude? And it's so tense. And it's like, actually, the tension that they're gonna face for that 30 seconds that we're asking them for a solution to help someone else is nothing in comparison to the tension that someone faces every month making those decisions. And I'm willing, the people that More Justice are willing to sit in that tension and hold it for however long the meeting is, for the 5, 10, 15 minutes, however, in order to see a solution get pushed out so that people who are dealing with those problems don't have to live with that anymore. And so there might be times when you're asking someone with the power to implement the solution, you're asking them to implement it, and they say no, or they get angry or whatever, and that can be tense then and there. And we're quick to want to kind of cut that tension, like make a joke or just kind of push back a little bit and say, oh, no, never mind, we'll ask something else. But I would really challenge and encourage y'all to sit in that, to just silence is a really big holder of tension that we use sometimes too. So for example, if I were to ask like Chantel, hey, County Councilwoman Chantel, will you implement Affordable Housing Trust Fund? And she just says no, I'll just sit there, let the silence kind of answer for her. And that silence right there feels like an hour. It feels like an eternity sometimes. And I am like behind the Zoom screen, literally shaking. But I know that they're going to hear that silence and say, okay, whatever I just said wasn't what was needed. It wasn't the right answer. And I got to figure out why. And usually, well, I don't know who said this, but they're like, the first person who speaks loses or something like that. Someone told me once, and you just kind of, let it sit there and say, okay, you just heard the story of Miss Gloria or whoever. You just heard the story of Robin and her family. And we're asking that you, in your position that you have, to do something good about this situation. And you say no, like what kind of message does that send to people? And it's a strong message is what it sends, that it's not important, it's not a priority, X, Y, or Z. And stepping into that tension and allowing it to sit there is also a good tool to getting people to support your solution and to say yes to it and advocate for it as well.
Also, to add to your comment, Ms. Bunch, silence, appropriate silence is a process. And if you use that process to reset, if you reset with appropriate silence, you give everyone time to think about what has been said. So it's not, the pushback is not bad when you do it that way. And you can actually move forward with a new thought because you've had time to think about what was just said in that situation. So as advocates, we have to learn the art of using appropriate silence so that we can push forward. Push is not a good word, but that's the word that comes to me, where we can push forward and seek a new solution, because the solution that you thought was what you wanted may not be what you need to do. And it gives you a time to reset and say, okay, how about this? How about that? Because it may not be that the person doesn't want to agree to it. There may be an element of it that they don't understand. You know what I mean? So you have to, it gives you time to clarify as well. So that's something that appropriate silence is really hard to deal with because it makes many people uncomfortable.
Right.
You have to be comfortable in it.
Yeah. It's a skill, something that you have to practice and something that you have to get used to. I don't know anyone, I think I've met probably one person in my whole life who was comfortable with it from the beginning, but most people have to get comfortable with it, comfortable with how to use it. And it reminds me of this quote from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that says, "We who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that's already alive. And we bring it out in the open where it can be seen and dealt with." And so I know a lot of us get uncomfortable because we feel like we're being, rude, for lack of better words, or feel like we're being too direct, too confrontational, but it's like, we didn't create this tension at all. We're just bringing to the surface a tension that's already there in hopes that it can be dealt with. And silence is also a really good tool that we can use to do that.
I wanted to just kind of reiterate also like where I've seen this work, because I really appreciate that example, because I hadn't thought about it in that way, where, you know, the optics creates a spotlight, which creates pressure to respond. But that pressure to respond, I've experienced before when teaching. And one of the best advice I was ever given was, whenever you ask a question just openly to the classroom, just wait, just look at them, be quiet, and stare. Somebody will say something, you know, because everybody just is like, and then somebody, you know, like, so, but this is an opposite power dimension, which is pretty neat too, where you're putting it in on them and making them analyze and reflect. So I really appreciate that.
And we spend the entire year training our leaders on this. It's positive enforcement for ourselves as well. But going back to one thing that Linda said about giving people the chance to think and maybe seek for further clarification, we do that. That's kind of like our negotiation process, where we'll ask an official, once we've sat in that silence, like, okay, well, why? Like like Kalli said, you heard the story of his glory, so we begin to ask why, and offer the opportunity for us to develop this way forward together. A lot of times there's a misconception that it's just demanding on our part. And the truth is we're open to conversation. Like if you just say no, and like, we don't want to, I don't want to talk to y'all anymore, bye, then that's on you. Like we're still here. Like we will remain at the table, you know, because we're in this for the long haul. And what we often explain to people is that we're not saying that it's our way, right? Because a lot of times in advocacy work, it comes across that you think you know the solution to these problems that's been here forever, but we're the experts, right? That's very common to come up in advocacy work. And so one of the things you have to be firm in is that, you know, we're not saying we know it all, but what we're saying is that we have done some research and we do see a way that it can move forward, because oftentimes these are issues that are not being actively worked on. There's always conversations around them, but it's rare that there are concrete action items and steps for a plan to move these issues forward. And so what we're saying is that we've come up with that. So let's work together to implement that. So I think that in advocacy work as well, you have to be mindful of that, because it's always a deflection. Like we talk our people through what we call the 7 Ds. And once you learn them, you see, like you understand the complete quote unquote game of policy, policy change, politics, because there will be a deflection or some sort of denial, or these different 7 Ds that you have to be mindful of, because you have to know that you'll stay the course in this identified solution.
Yeah, it's a good point too. A lot of the times people in those 7 Ds, like, and those are like deflection or discrediting, stuff like that. We're always told, you know, like, oh, you know, well, we're looking into it. This is a priority for us, and we've been working on this for forever. But like Chantel said, there's never that concrete plan. And so when we want to push it a step forward and say, okay, well, you've been working on it for a while, what's the plan to get implemented? That's when it gets like, they get quiet. They're like, oh, well, no, we need to, it's just like, well, let's do it right now. Like, you know, we don't have to wait 4 more months for another study to be done. Like, you've done studies every single year. You know what the problem is. You know what can fix it. Like, let's go ahead and make that plan to do it. And that's really a big part, that a key that pushes advocacy work as well, is having a plan and making sure it's being followed through. Like, so hold people accountable for doing their part of the plan as well. Because, for example, for our affordable housing campaign, we talked to so many officials who were like, oh yeah, affordable housing is a really big priority for us. We've been studying it for a long time. And we're like, okay, well, out of those studies, what did you find the solution to be? And they were able to list out a few of them, and some that we had found as well. And we're like, oh, great, it's going to be a quick, easy campaign. We'll get this done. But then when it came time to put the solutions they found into practice, they were like, oh, well, we need to just wait a little bit. We need to just study some more. We need to do some more research. And we always got to get people to push past that want to keep things the same, or not want to, you know, stir the boat or whatever, but to say, let's actually sit, let's make a plan forward, and let's do it. Because otherwise we'll be coming back in the next year and the year after that and the year after that, asking for the same thing, because we never take that step forward into implementing it. And a big part of that too is just getting people to do what we call visioning in More Justice, is to kind of imagine what the community would look like if that solution were there. So that's something that I would encourage you all to do as well, to just sit with yourselves or with each other and think, okay, if this solution, if we had more resources for people in the Latino community, what would that look like for Columbia? If we had Medicaid expansion right now, especially for mothers as well, what would that look like for Columbia or Richland County? And once you can vision that future world in your mind, it makes that drive to want to get there so much stronger, and that you're willing to sit in that tension, sit in that silence, make those plans, hold people accountable to get there. But I was sorry. That was basically all that I guess we wanted to talk about. I know we wanted to leave some time open for more questions, and there's only about 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure we don't cut that too short. But does anyone have any specific questions or any other comments they wanted to ask or add?
I have a question.
Mhm.
Let's say that you after you guys have made your plan and you present it to the group that, so let's say school board, and they say no to your plan. What is your process for revisiting the plan and with the officials? Do you ask them, what is it about this that you didn't agree with? Do you go back and do research? Or just what is your process to make it more palatable for them?
And so, and I'll let Chantel answer as well, since she worked in education specifically, but the short answer is all of that. We always ask why, why, what is the issue? Is there something that can be negotiated? Is something that can be changed? We do go back and we do more research, we do more power building, because obviously the problem hasn't changed. So we continue to press on that as well. And we ask again. We don't, just take the first no and say, okay, well, we tried. Like, that's all we could do. I guess it won't change. We regroup, we re-strategize, we figure out if the part of the solution, like you said, needs to be amended somehow, or we figure out why they said no, if it's a reason that can't be negotiated, we figure out all that kind of stuff out, and then we come back again publicly and ask again.
Yep, and the truth is, no issue is ever, or solution presented is ever really palatable.
Right.
That's why we have to have people power, right? That's just the reality of it. So I'll give you two, two backgrounds on two. So with education, we've practically been stonewalled. So in that instance, we go and meet with outside districts that are very similar to ours, right around ours, and kind of build up momentum there to say, look, even our neighbors are doing this. This is how it's working. We then plan to meet with schools. So we, for the education campaign, it was about the high suspension rate of Black and brown students, right? This common national trend. And so we then tap into schools that actually have resources within the given district that we're trying to target, and say, look, even this school is doing it. But then you look at something like gun violence, where there's resistance, and it's simply because it's said that, oh, we're already doing the solution you want us to implement. And so we come back with research as to how that's not the case. That's not true, because we've been told, from our police chief and the sheriff, that they're implementing group violence intervention, which is the solution that we found to be needed in Columbia. And they've said that they've been implementing it, but there's no proof to show that with fidelity they're implementing all parts of this particular strategy. And so it depends on what the issue is. Like, either we, based on their response as to why, we'll determine what the issue is. Like, if we're just completely stonewalled, we have to go outside and then build up more momentum. But if they're saying that they're already doing something, that's a different resistance. So we have to kind of lay out for them that, well, maybe we're not, as a city, we are not even pointing the blame. So I hope that answers in depth enough for you, Ms. Guess.
Yes, ma'am. I'm just going to add to that. I thank you for your answer, because I understand where you're coming from with that. Also, I understand that the mission of organizations and the philosophy and the policies and procedures of organizations preclude, I'm not going to use big words, I'm sorry, have something to do with how organizations proceed with programs or procedures or policy. And they only do that which they have to do to say, we're doing this. So change for certain organizations, sometimes it becomes very difficult to penetrate any change because of the three things I mentioned. So if they sit in their policies and procedures and they don't necessarily feel as though they have to do or want to do what you're asking them to do, because federal government, state government policies take precedence, particularly when you start talking about changing educational policies and procedures or programmatic activities such as the one that you're talking about. So as advocates, understanding that can help us to say, to formulate more strategic ways of dealing with, or implementing, new policy, not necessarily policy, but just activities within the policies and procedures that they have. So that could be a way to strategize as well.
For sure. And a part of that research process that we talk about, we know that these are possible solutions. So it's not like we can name for them cities that are implementing them across the nation, districts like ours across the nation. So it's never anything like we just created because we thought we were creative people who could, come into the city and say, yeah, we're geniuses, here we are. So we're never the first to want to implement any of these. Like it's been like proven in other places to work when implemented. And most of the times we like to say with fidelity, meaning you implement all parts of it. So,
I was just wondering if More Justice would be willing to train like a small group of our team sometime in the future. There's only 2 of us here today, but I mean, more would benefit from hearing all of this wisdom and expertise.
I can also note, and I hope everyone is okay, I did record this session, so it will be available. People have to hear it.
I think that's, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, did you mean something very similar to this? Because I saw the recording. So yeah, like we're always open to share, but I just wanted to make sure I understood if you meant like
it was just like there was just like, sorry. There was just like you threw out this whole 7Ds concept, and I was like, oh, that's cool. That kind of stuff, like some of the like foundational stuff that maybe you guys just have interwoven throughout your foundation. More. I just want more justice.
Us too. We want more justice.
Love it.
Yeah.
We so appreciate the both of you for sharing with us. This has been great information. I wish I had known this when I was a kid in high school. I would have been an activist right there. But yeah, we so appreciate it, and appreciate you taking the time to bring this, your actions, your process of advocating.
That Dom connected us?
And yeah, thank you for Dom. He's not on today, but
He made the connection.
I forgot Dom's last name, Dom Francis. Dominique Francis for connecting us with more justice. Don't laugh at me, Rebecca.
Hey, Rebecca.
So to everyone, we got about 3 more minutes. If there's any last minute, you got to say it. I thank everyone for joining. Thank you all for joining. I hope you take this back with you. We will have it on our YouTube channel to be shared with your friends. And I love the fact that this empowers us, hopefully reminds everyone the power that we have even in our own small communities. Of course, through the association, we'll definitely be looking at trying to, come up with one thing at least that we as an association want to move forward with in the next year to advocate for. So we're going to put some of this into place as well. Like, not that we're not already doing it, but we do have some additional input, insight. Thank you both.
I just want to thank you all again for inviting us and for wanting to do some good work in the Columbia, Richland County area, wherever the areas that you all are.
All over the state.
So, all over the state. Okay, great.
Yeah, we have people on from everywhere over the state.
Yeah, well, I definitely admire the work that you all do, and thanks for introducing us to the concept of community health workers. I'm still pretty blown away by that. I'd never heard of that until this year, and so I'm just really excited about the work that y'all are doing, and excited to see the way that South Carolina can change for the better.
Thank you. Your community, we've definitely ordained you as community health workers. Because yes, you can become members because we look at all of the determinants of health, housing, education, opportunities, all of those impact people's health. So thank you. Well, we give you back all a 1 minute of your time. Thank you all so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your day and enjoy the beautiful weekend. Take care.
Stay safe, y'all.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
That was great.